So, Anthony, network modernization and connectivity are big priorities for state IT leaders right now. Tell me broadly, I mean, what are you seeing in that space right now?
So it's a great question. So I take it from the latter first, right? So from a connectivity perspective, what we're seeing is the need for multiple types of connectivity and the agility. So what I mean by that is not to bring in another topic, but cloud migrations are really forcing the type of connectivity that state CIOs are looking into. Meaning, as I move more applications and workloads to the cloud, then I need more of the public type of connectivity, which if I don't move completely to all public, now I'm sitting in a scenario where I have a hybrid network. So who are the right partners to provide hybrid networks for me? What are my concerns around hybrid networking? How does that impact my operations? Right. And what have I invested in the current network? So there's the idea of technology debt in there as well. So from a connectivity perspective, state CIOs are looking at, and even more local municipalities and large cities are looking at flexibility and agility. And, and and so that I worked from there backwards because network modernization, many of the old networks, TDM style networks, copper based networks, they don't possess those things. So today the CIOs are looking at, and people we're talking to are looking at, how do I get more mobility, more wireless type connectivity? Maybe there's satellite. We're also looking at Ethernet, right? So what are the Ethernet options out there? And again, that comes back to how much am I going to be public? How much am I going to be private? And then how do I pair all that together? So it's a three-prong. What's the connectivity? How much modernization do I need to do, and can I afford to do? And much of that is informed by how I've made moves to the cloud.
I think underlying that question, there's a lot of barriers present inside of how these state and local government leaders approach something like this. So, what are you hearing from folks in terms of those barriers, and how are you working with them to really get them across those?
Yeah, I think the first barrier is, I would normally say, money, right? Budgets are constrained, and I think that's always a constraint, and it's not just public sector customers, right? I think that's in general. Maybe it's exacerbated for public sector customers and states, but I think the skill set needed to properly design and architect the new network. So the big question that comes to me is, what should I look like? Okay, where should I go? And I don't know that there's any one should, but there are certainly some key tenets around what does your connectivity look like, as we've discussed. What is your visibility into that network? So what are your tools? And that goes back to a money constraint. And then, right, what level of automation do I need as I move to the cloud? So again, I think connectivity, security, automation are some of the constraints, which all leads to what skill set do I have? And so if I don't have the skill set, where then do I go to get that skill set? Who's the right partner to use? And is there a way to put some of what we've already discussed together in terms of network and connectivity and the tools that I need, and find a single partner maybe that can do it in a way that makes financial sense for me?
I want to dive into the connectivity piece, and I want to get to security a little bit later on. But from a connectivity perspective, I mean, you're with Verizon. 5G is an area that we've heard so much about over the last few years, and it's something that we're hearing from CIOs. They're thinking a lot about. They're spending time wondering how this is all going to fit into the puzzle. From your perspective, as you're working with these customers, I mean, how does 5G play a role in all of this going forward?
Yeah. So I do work for Verizon. I like it, right? And we like to say we were first to 5G. So this is near and dear to our heart, because it's not just Verizon, but in general, the attributes of 5G, the things that 5G bring from a performance perspective: low latency, higher bandwidth, greater throughput, high number of connected devices in a square kilometer. All of what we call the 8 currencies, and I didn't mention them all, but certainly that it brings these currencies to connectivity that we couldn't get in previous generations of wireless technology, and in some cases, and then opens the door for taking out what I'll call immobile, fixed, right, connections, wired connections, and changing them to more of a 5G connection. And again, this goes back to a public-private conversation. As more and more connectivity goes public, that means more, if I could get what I have on wired connections on wireless, then I'm going to do that because of all the advantages it brings. Now, where do we see this playing out is some of the use cases, if you will. Where do we see inquiry about this and advancement about this? And we're working with some of our key partners that you can see some announcements about smart communities. And I know that term means a lot of things to a lot of people, but think intersections, saving pedestrians' lives, right? By letting cars know at the intersect, no pun intended, the intersection of cars and lights and pedestrian safety. Just situational awareness for first responders. I think 5G lends itself in there. And so, I think the remit of most CIOs that I'm speaking to is so broad, right? From streets to people. I think 5G applies across all of that remit, and in new ways, right? Having wireless really blend into where we might have thought of wired before, yet not losing any of the performance that I may have had from a wired connection.
We talked about barriers earlier, and I think that some people refer to something like 5G as "quote unquote" emerging technology. I don't quite know that it fits into that bucket, but anytime you have an emerging technology, CIOs struggle to figure out how it fits in from a budgetary perspective, from an operational perspective, how to embrace this newer form of technology that doesn't quite fit in with how things have usually been done. You talked about that wired connection. So when you talk to these folks about 5G, how are you advising them to make sure that they are structured and set up in a way that 5G can help them solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, it's an interesting question in so far as, first we define 5G. So do you mean 5G mobility, right? A cell phone, a tablet? Do you mean 5G in the sense of a fixed wireless access type connection where you're maybe replacing WAN? Do you mean 5G in the way of private networking, where you in essence get a packet cord delivered especially for you, for your campus, for your state, for whatever? And so once you get that definition, and once you define that with the end user, then it's, what about the use cases? And use cases begin with, what are the challenges you're having? So what is it that you can't do today that you would like to do? So then that kind of drives a use case conversation. Then we start to marry, okay, so now if the outcome is X, then how do we get there in a way that makes sense financially, from an expertise perspective, right? All the obstacles we've talked about. And what we're seeing is proofs of concept, proofs of value. So, okay, I get the concept of the technology, but now does it work for my use case? And usually what we do is, and often at Verizon, we in partnership, we find that proof of concept or that proof of value, and we work to build it out in small, starting small, prove it out, and then phased approach to the rest of where we would apply it in the business.
Let's go back to the security piece, because I think that's something that, it's no secret that cyber and information security is a top priority for pretty much everyone in the sphere. Sometimes you could say pretty much everyone in the world at this point, if we watch the news. How are you approaching and helping folks think a little bit differently about cybersecurity?
I think it starts with something I saw today from our threat intel team, which talked about the 3M attack that is growing in prominence within the public sector. So states are obviously a big part of that. I think what we're doing is continuing to share information that we have, either through data breach investigation reports, intel, whatever, to assess, hey, are you aware, Mr. and Mrs. CIO, that these things are happening? Are they happening to you? And look, CIOs are smart and they're aware that these things are happening. What we tend to do is provide a little more detail and then drill down on what's keeping you up? What do you think is most prevalent to you? I think the other piece is extending security from the traditional kind of defend the walls to I now have an amorphous edge. So I need to defend the person and the identity and the data. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example of that, is often as we going back to mobile a little bit, is as we equip states, education facilities, buses, different parts of a state with wireless, fixed wireless access. We also have to care for things like the Child Internet Protection Act, right? We have to make sure that only that people using that connection can only get to what they're supposed to get to, and we've cared for regulations and laws and things of that nature. But then on the flip side is now, again, as I move to cloud, as I change my use case, how do I protect the data, not only when it's at rest, but how do I protect that data in motion? And going back to the 3M ransomware, as we see an increase in ransomware, what's happening when a ransomware attack happens? What goes down? Key services, right? The state has to provide services to its constituents. So if I can suddenly not provide those services, that's a huge impact. So I think that's the ultimate outcome, is how do we make sure we protect the amorphous edge? How do we protect the data, and how do we keep the services running? And I think there's a number of ways to do that, through identity and access management, through managed detection and response, right? All the things that are out there in the marketplace today.
So you touch on a really important point there at the end, and that is services, right? That is the one of the core, if not the core function of a government leader when it comes to technology, is to provide this service for the constituent, for the resident, the citizen, however you want to phrase it. So let's pull all of what we're talking about here together. How does all of this, from the network to 5G to security, how does it all come together for constituent engagement, and what does it mean for the future?
Well, so let's work in reverse. I think what it means for the future is really informed by the near past, meaning, so what we saw in the pandemic, and I'll give you an example, right, with labor departments, employment development agencies, right, is that unemployment insurance and unemployment type benefits and services obviously skyrocketed. So did identity theft because of that, right? So did the number of calls that the agency had to take. So I think, one, we need to have a view. Where it comes together is, do we have the right view to what tomorrow looks like in a post-pandemic environment? So when we say that, then it's what we learned is I have to be way more agile, because I might get a spike today, it comes down tomorrow, but how do I have that level of agility and flexibility of the infrastructure that necessarily informs cloud? I mean, boom, I got to move to cloud, right? I got to get more SaaS-based solutions. And that goes all the way back to, now I have to protect that. I have to have the number of the right tools to see what's happening in there. And then I think to me, I use the labor and employment development departments as key, because that's where we're talking about contact centers. We're talking about engagement through multiple channels. I hate to use the term, but I'll use it, right? Omni-channel. Can I get a text? Can I get a video? Can I get a live call? What can I get? So I think all of the network modernization, the wireless, the hybrid, the public-private, the security, all comes together in, how do I make sure that the citizen, the constituent, whatever, can make the call, can get the person they need, can get the information they need if it's not a person, and can leave that interaction, let's call it that, with the proper outcome that they desired in the beginning. And so I think they're all under that outcome, if that's the umbrella, right, is underpinned by the things we've discussed here.
That's awesome, Anthony. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate the chat.
Yep, awesome. Thank you for having me, Jake. It's been great.